2 weeks ago, my wife went to visit our daughter and son-in-law, and I decided to surprise them by going too. When I approached the door of their house, a neighbor shouted, "Wait, I have something to tell you." 5 minutes later, the police arrived, and the consequences turned everything upside down. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The highway stretched ahead like a sentence I couldn't finish. I-75 had never felt this long before. Though I'd driven it dozens of times over the years, my hands gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary, knuckles pale against the black leather. The phone sat in the cup holder, screen dark, mocking me with its silence. 4 days. Elizabeth never went 4 days without returning a call. I glanced at the phone again, knowing I'd see nothing new, but checking anyway. Same unanswered texts, same voicemails delivered into the void. The last one I'd left that morning sounded desperate, even to my own ears. "Liz, I'm worried. Just let me know you're okay. Call me back, please." The surprise visit had seemed like a good idea yesterday. Drive to Charlotte, show up with flowers, take Elizabeth and Clara out for lunch somewhere nice. Make a day of it. But somewhere around mile marker 72, the surprise started feeling less like a gift and more like an emergency response. Exit signs counted down the distance. 50 miles to Charlotte. 45. 40. My mind kept circling back to the months before Elizabeth left for this visit. Clara's phone calls had changed. Not in frequency. She'd always been good about checking in, but in content. Every conversation eventually steered toward money. The roof needed repairs. Benjamin's contracting work had slowed down. Could we help with the mortgage this month? And then more recently, questions that left a sour taste. "Dad, have you and Mom thought about updating your will? With property values changing and everything." I'd mentioned it to Elizabeth after that particular call. She was folding laundry in our bedroom, her movements unhurried and precise. "She's our daughter. Samuel," she'd said without looking up. "She's just going through a rough patch." We went through rough patches, too. Remember. I remembered. But something about Clara's tone felt different, calculated. Maybe I was just getting paranoid in my old age, seeing shadows where there was only ordinary family struggle. The exit for Charlotte appeared. I merged right, following the ramp into suburban sprawl. Strip malls and chain restaurants gave way to residential streets lined with identical 2-story homes. Clara's neighborhood looked the same as always. Tidy lawns, basketball hoops in driveways, minivans parked at careful angles. Her house stood at the end of a cul-de-sac. The lawn had been mowed recently, leaving perfect parallel stripes in the grass. No newspapers cluttered the driveway. Nothing seemed disturbed or wrong. I pulled up to the curb and killed the engine. For a moment, I just sat there. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe Elizabeth had dropped her phone in Clara's pool, or left it in a restaurant, or simply gotten caught up in mother-daughter time and forgotten to charge it. Simple explanations existed. They had to. I got out and walked to the front door. The concrete path felt solid under my shoes. Normal. I reached for the doorbell and pressed it, hearing the chime echo inside the house. Waited. Counted to 30. Pressed it again. Nothing. I tried the door handle. Locked. Cupped my hands against the front window and peered through the glass. The living room looked empty. Furniture arranged exactly as I remembered from our last visit at Christmas. No lights on, no movement. I pulled out my phone and dialed Clara's number. It rang 5 times, then dropped to voicemail, her cheerful, recorded voice. "Hey, this is Clara. Can't get to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back super soon." I didn't leave a message. Instead, I tried Benjamin. Same result. Straight to voicemail after several rings. His message was shorter, more businesslike. "Benjamin Harris. Leave your name and number. The unease that had been building since Atlanta crystallized into something sharper. Where were they? Clara knew I might visit. I'd mentioned it vaguely during our last conversation. She always answered her phone. Always. Excuse me. Wait. I turned. A man was hurrying across the lawn from the house next door, moving with purpose. Mid-40s, thinning hair, dressed in a polo shirt and khakis. His expression carried urgency that didn't match the quiet suburban afternoon. Are you family? He called out, slightly breathless. Are you Elizabeth's husband? The question stopped me cold. How did this stranger know Elizabeth's name? He reached me and extended his hand, though the gesture seemed automatic, something he did while his mind worked on more important matters. I'm David Mitchell. I live next door. He pointed at the house he'd emerged from. Listen, I need to tell you something. About 10 days ago, something happened here. He glanced back at Clara's house, then at me, his jaw working as he chose his words. There were screams, he said finally. Late at night, my chest tightened. David didn't wait for me to ask questions. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them in too long. It was around midnight, maybe a little after, 10 days ago. June 15th. I remember because it was the night before my daughter's birthday. I heard screaming from this house. He gestured at Clara's front windows. Not just yelling, screaming. A woman begging someone to call an ambulance, saying she needed help. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, subtle but unmistakable. I got up, went to my front window, David continued. Clara and Benjamin came outside right there on the lawn. They were yelling back at the house, saying everything was fine. Just a nightmare. No emergency, but that screaming. He shook his head. That wasn't a nightmare. I've heard nightmares wake people up. This was terror. What did you do? The question came out hoarse. I called emergency services anyway, told them someone needed help at this address. Clara and Benjamin saw me on my phone through the window and started waving at me to stop. But I'd already made the call. He crossed his arms, defensive now, as if he expected me to criticize the decision. The paramedics arrived maybe 12 minutes later. They went inside with Clara and Benjamin. When they came back out, they had a woman on a stretcher. She could barely lift her head. It was Elizabeth. The world narrowed to David's face, his mouth forming words that couldn't possibly be real. She was barely conscious, he said. The paramedics were moving fast, checking her vitals, asking delicate questions. Your daughter and her husband just stood there watching. Didn't get in the ambulance. Didn't even follow it to the hospital. They went back inside, and the next morning both their cars were gone. Haven't seen them since. My hands were shaking. I looked down at them, surprised by the tremor. Then back at David. Which hospital, I don't know. I assumed he faltered. I assumed family would handle it. That someone would contact you. I pulled out my phone, dialed Clara again. Voicemail. Benjamin. Voicemail. Then I called emergency services, forcing my voice steady as I identified myself, and asked about ambulance calls to this address 10 days ago. The dispatcher put me on hold. Music played incongruously cheerful. David stood watching me, his concern etched deeper now that he'd said everything out loud. Emergency services. How can I help you? I'm calling about an ambulance dispatched to 924 Oak Ridge Drive on June 15th. I said. The patient was my wife, Elizabeth Thornton. I need to know which hospital she was taken to. Keys clicked on the other end. Carolina's Medical Center, sir. The call came in at 12:51 a.m. Thank you. I hung up and immediately dialed the hospital. 4 transfers, 4 different voices asking me to hold. Finally, a nurse in the ICU with a tired, professional tone. Elizabeth Thornton. Yes, She was admitted June 15th. Serious condition, but stable as of yesterday. What happened to her, I can't provide details over the phone. Sir, you'll need to come in person. Are you family? I'm her husband. A pause. 4th floor ICU. Ask for the charge nurse when you arrive. I lowered the phone. David was watching me, waiting. I'm calling the police. I told him. This isn't right. He nodded immediately. I'll give a statement. Whatever you need. I dialed Charlotte Police Department, reported a possible crime, gave them the address, explained what David had witnessed. The officer on the line told me someone would meet me at the hospital. I was already moving toward my car. The hospital's on Randolph Road. David called after me. Carolinas Medical Center. Take Highway 74 east. I'll find it. I got in, started the engine, pulled away from the curb without looking back. The drive felt surreal. Traffic lights changed colors. People crossed streets with shopping bags and coffee cups, going about ordinary Thursdays while my entire world cracked open. What happened to Elizabeth? Why wouldn't Clara call an ambulance for her own mother? Why did they run? Questions multiplied faster than my speedometer climbed. Carolinas Medical Center rose against the skyline, all glass and concrete angles. I parked in the visitor lot, took the elevator to the 4th floor, followed signs to the ICU. A woman in plain clothes was waiting near the nurse's station, detective's badge clipped to her belt. Mr. Thornton. She extended her hand. Detective Sarah Jenkins, Charlotte PD. I got the call about your wife's situation. Where is she? Room 418. But I need to ask you some questions first. When did you last speak with Elizabeth? 3 weeks ago when she left to visit our daughter. We texted a few times after that. Then 4 days ago, she stopped responding. Jenkins wrote in a small notebook. And you didn't know she was hospitalized. Nobody contacted me. I came here because I was worried. A neighbor told me what happened. Her expression shifted, professional mask slipping just enough to show something darker underneath. Your wife suffered severe poisoning. Mr. Thornton. Combination of sedatives and cardiac medication. The dose was potentially lethal. She's been unconscious for most of the week. We've been trying to locate next of kin. The words landed like physical blows. My daughter and son-in-law were with her, I said slowly. The neighbor heard her screaming for help. They told him it was nothing. Then they disappeared. Does that sound like an accident to you? Detective Jenkins' jaw tightened. Room 418. Go see your wife. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. The ICU room was dim, curtains half drawn, machines beeped steadily, monitoring vitals with mechanical precision. Elizabeth lay in the bed, tubes and wires connecting her to equipment I didn't want to understand. Her face looked smaller than I remembered, skin pale against white pillows. I pulled a chair close and took her hand. It felt fragile, like bird bones. I'm here now, I said quietly. The words were for her, even if she couldn't hear them. When you wake up, you'll tell me what they did. And I promise you. My voice dropped lower, harder. I'll make sure they answer for every second of this. Something shifted inside me. Then the shocked father evaporated. In his place, the prosecutor I'd been for 35 years, the man who built cases brick by brick, who found patterns in chaos, who knew exactly how to make people accountable for their actions. Clara and Benjamin had made a mistake. They left evidence. They'd left witnesses. They'd left their victim alive. And they'd underestimated me. I didn't leave the chair beside her bed. The nurses offered alternatives. A cot in the waiting room. A nearby hotel with a discount for families. But I refused. My hands stayed wrapped around Elizabeth's, feeling for any change, any sign she was coming back. Somewhere around 6 in the morning, her fingers twitched against my palm. I straightened, leaned closer. Her eyelids fluttered. struggling against whatever darkness held her. A nurse noticed, moved quickly to the monitors, checked readings, pressed a call button. Within minutes, a doctor arrived, pen light in hand, examining Elizabeth's responses with clinical efficiency. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, pupils adjusting to the dim light. Then they found my face and held there. Samuel. The word came out rough, barely recognizable through the damage a ventilator tube leaves behind. Where? The nurse brought water, held the cup while Elizabeth took small sips. Her throat worked painfully, but gradually. Sound returned. How long have I been here? 10 days. The words felt inadequate. You've been here 10 days. Her eyes widened, confusion bleeding into fear. I watched her trying to piece together time she'd lost, reaching for memories that scattered like smoke. The doctor confirmed she was stable enough to talk. Detective Jenkins appeared shortly after, recording device in hand, expression professional but not unkind. Elizabeth described what she could remember, voice shaking through the account. Clara had made dinner on June 15th. Nothing fancy. Pasta with vegetables, garlic bread. About 90 minutes after eating, something went wrong. Dizziness first, then nausea. Then her heart racing so fast she couldn't catch her breath. I asked Clara to call an ambulance, Elizabeth said, staring at her hands. She said no, said it was just food poisoning, that I'd feel better if I lay down. But it got worse. Everything was spinning and my chest hurt so much. I thought. She stopped, swallowed. I begged her. I said, Clara, please. Something's wrong with my heart. She just looked at Benjamin. And he stood in front of the door, wouldn't let me leave the room. I sat motionless, absorbing each word like a blow. I screamed for help, Elizabeth continued. I thought maybe someone outside would hear. Then everything went dark. I remember a voice through the window, someone calling out, but after that, nothing. Just waking up here now. Detective Jenkins stopped the recording, gave Elizabeth a moment before speaking. The toxicology shows levels of ambizol and cardoxin that would kill most people your age. Mrs. Thornton. Someone with medical knowledge would understand exactly what this combination does. This wasn't accidental. What are those? Elizabeth asked, though her face suggested she didn't really want to know. Sleeping medication and cardiac medication. Jenkins said, neither was prescribed to you. Do you know if Clara or Benjamin had access to those drugs? Elizabeth's forehead creased. They were pill bottles in their bathroom. I saw them when I first arrived. Benjamin mentioned something about anxiety and trouble sleeping, but I didn't pay much attention. The detective made notes, asked follow-up questions, established timeline details that would matter in court. I listened, building my own mental file of every fact, every inconsistency. I need to conduct interviews, Jenkins said eventually. Clara Harris and Benjamin Harris just returned to their Charlotte home. Apparently, they took a trip. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I'm coming with you, I said, already standing. Mr. Thornton, this is official police business given your relationship to the victim and the suspects. They're not suspects. They're criminals who tried to murder my wife. Jenkins's expression softened slightly. Which is exactly why you can't be present during questioning. I understand your frustration, but we need to do this right. Let me handle it. She was correct, and I knew it. Decades in the prosecutor's office taught me the importance of clean investigations, untainted evidence. I sat back down. Hours passed. Elizabeth drifted in and out of sleep, exhausted by the effort of consciousness. I held her hand, watched machines track her vital signs, tried not to imagine Benjamin standing between her and the door while she begged for help. Detective Jenkins returned late afternoon. Her expression told me everything before she spoke. They admit Elizabeth was sick that night, she said, pulling up a chair. But their story is that she took the pills herself, said she couldn't sleep, was stressed about family finances. They claimed they were about to call an ambulance when the neighbor, quote, interfered. They left for the Bahamas the next day because the trip was pre-planned, and they didn't realize how serious the situation was since the hospital said Elizabeth was stable. That's a lie. Elizabeth's voice stronger now, but trembling with anger. I believe you, Jenkins said, but their story is coordinated, rehearsed. A defense attorney could argue the poisoning caused confusion, affected your memory of events. Right now, it's your word against theirs. We need more. After she left, I sat in silence. 35 years in the prosecutor's office had prepared me for this moment. Though I'd never imagined applying that knowledge to my own family. Investigation takes months. Evidence is circumstantial, even if charges are filed. Conviction isn't guaranteed. And meanwhile, Clara and Benjamin would walk free, acting innocent, telling their version to anyone who'd listen. I looked at Elizabeth, frail and traumatized in the hospital bed. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Robert Ellis, private investigator who'd worked dozens of cases with me during my prosecutor days, digging up financial records and hidden connections that turned circumstantial cases into convictions. I pressed dial. Robert, it's Samuel Thornton. I need your help with something. It's personal. The coffee shop in Atlanta was nearly empty on Friday morning. Robert Ellis sat across from me. 4 file folders spread between our cups. His expression grim as he walked me through what he'd found in just 3 days. Your daughter made 52 calls to creditors in the past 4 months, he said, sliding the first folder forward. Collection agencies, credit card companies, mortgage services. Every account has past due, most by 70 days or more. I opened the folder. Phone records, bank statements, credit reports, all the financial debris of a life falling apart. Benjamin owed money everywhere. Online gambling sites, sports betting, poker rooms in Charlotte and Raleigh. The numbers kept climbing. 95,000 in credit card debt. Robert continued. Another 130,000 in gambling losses across various platforms. Their mortgage is 3 months overdue. Foreclosure proceedings started last week. And Clara knew all this? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. She called your estate attorney 5 weeks before the poisoning, June 20th. Asked about probate timelines. What happens when someone dies intestate versus with a will? Whether adult children automatically inherit. The attorney thought she was just curious about family planning. Robert paused. That's not curiosity. Samuel, that's planning. I closed the folder. The pieces falling into a pattern I recognized from dozens of prosecutions. Financial desperation plus opportunity equals motive. But knowing it and proving it in court were different challenges. From the coffee shop, I drove to William Carter's office downtown. Carter had been my go-to for complex cases requiring civil litigation expertise. The kind of attorney who understood how to apply pressure from multiple angles. His office overlooked Atlanta's skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing office buildings drifting across blue water. Carter sat behind his desk, reading Robert's report, with the focused intensity that made him successful. Criminal court requires proof beyond reasonable doubt, he said finally. The DA might struggle with that given the coordinated alibi and Elizabeth's memory gaps. But civil court preponderance of evidence 51%. We can prove this on civil grounds even if criminal charges fail, and we can make their lives very uncomfortable in the process. What are you suggesting? Wrongful injury lawsuit, emotional distress, medical expenses. We freeze their assets during discovery, force them to answer questions under oath, expose every financial motive to the criminal investigators. Civil litigation can be a powerful weapon when used strategically. He leaned back, fingers steepled. And I assume you want this done aggressively. I want it done correctly. I said. But yes, aggressively. Carter smiled. Not warmth, but recognition of shared purpose. I'll have papers drawn up by end of day. My next stop was the estate attorney's office, a smaller practice near Midtown. Thomas Reynolds had handled our wills 6 years ago. Straightforward documents that left everything to each other. Then to Clara after we both passed. I need changes. I told him after explaining the situation. Remove Clara completely. Everything goes to Elizabeth. Then to Charity if she predeceases me. And add language that if Clara contests this will, she forfeits any claim whatsoever. Thomas's pen moved across legal pad, taking notes. You want a no-contest clause standard practice when there's concern about challenges. I can have a revised will ready for signature tomorrow. Today, I said. I'll wait. He nodded, understanding the urgency without needing explanation. Back home that evening, Elizabeth sat in our living room, discharged from the hospital earlier that day. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a blanket despite Atlanta's heat. I'd shown her Robert's report over dinner, or tried to. She'd put the folder down after 4 pages. She called about the will 5 weeks before this happened. Her voice was hollow, processing facts that contradicted everything she'd believed about our daughter. She actually planned it. The evidence suggests so. I kept telling you she was just going through a rough time, that she'd never. Elizabeth's hands trembled slightly. I was so wrong. I sat beside her, careful not to touch her without permission. Hospital experiences leave invisible boundaries. You weren't wrong to love your daughter. She was wrong to betray that love. We sat in silence for several minutes. Then Elizabeth straightened, something hardening in her expression. What's the next step? I explained Carter's strategy. The civil lawsuit, the asset freeze, the discovery process that would expose everything. Elizabeth listened without interruption, then nodded once. Do it. Saturday morning. I called Clara's number. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice carefully bright. Dad, how's Mom doing? I've been so worried. Your mother needs family right now, I interrupted, keeping my tone neutral. I think we should talk. All of us together, face to face. Can you and Benjamin come to Atlanta this weekend? We need to work through what happened. A pause. I could almost hear her calculating, deciding how to play this. Of course, she said finally. We want to help however we can. Sunday work. Sunday's perfect. Come around noon. After I hung up, I signed the authorization form for Carter's lawsuit. Tuesday morning, Clara and Benjamin would be served with papers. But first, I wanted to see their faces when they thought they'd gotten away with it. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I wrote my name. Not regret, just recognition of the moment when everything would change. The civil complaint sat on my desk, 42 pages of allegations that read like an indictment, which in a sense it was. William Carter had done excellent work, every charge supported by medical records, every dollar of damages calculated precisely. $2.5 million in compensatory and punitive damages for attempted murder, intentional infliction of emotional distress, medical expenses approaching $250,000. Carter's voice came through the speakerphone. We file within the hour. Once the process server delivers this to their door, there's no walking it back. You certain about this? File it. I said. Understood. I'll call you after service is complete. I hung up and pictured the scene. Process server approaching Clara's house, knocking on the door, handing over the thick manila envelope, her opening it, scanning the first page, seeing the words attempted murder and $2.5 million in bold type. The satisfaction I felt was cold, methodical. This was step 1. The call came 4 hours later, not from Carter, but from Clara. I let it ring 3 times before answering, keeping my voice level. Yes. $2.5 million. Her scream came through sharp enough to hurt. Dad, have you lost your mind? This is insane. It was an accident. Mom took those pills herself because she couldn't sleep. You're ruining our lives over a misunderstanding. The same rehearsed explanation she'd given the detective. I let her continue, listening for inconsistencies, cataloging every claim. We were trying to help her. She was stressed about money, about the house, and she took too many pills. We were about to call for help when that nosy neighbor interfered. Now you're suing us, your own daughter. She paused for breath. I spoke into the silence. You had a choice that night. Clara, when your mother was screaming for help, begging you to call an ambulance, you made a choice. You chose to let her suffer. Now you'll answer for that choice in court. Her tone shifted instantly from hysteria to fury. You're destroying my life over nothing. We're your family. Family doesn't let family die for inheritance money. I ended the call. 25 minutes passed before my phone rang again. Benjamin this time. I answered without greeting. His voice came out careful, modulated, the tone of someone trying to negotiate a business deal. Samuel, listen, I know this looks bad, but we can work this out. Right, family should handle things privately. What if there's a way to make this go away? We could agree to certain terms, maybe some financial arrangement. I walked to the window, looked out at Atlanta's downtown skyline, while Benjamin's desperate pitch continued. When he finally stopped, I responded, You're offering me money with what, the $95,000 you owe on credit cards, the $130,000 in gambling debts? Or were you planning to use the inheritance you thought you'd get when Elizabeth died? Silence. Then, in a voice stripped of its careful tone, What are you talking about? I didn't answer the question. There's no deal. Benjamin, see you in court. Another hang-up. Detective Jenkins called that afternoon. We executed the search warrant this morning. Found some interesting items. Go on. Empty prescription bottle in the master bathroom medicine cabinet. Ambazole sleeping pills prescribed to Benjamin 4 months ago. 35 pills. Bottle completely empty, and his fingerprints are all over it. She paused. But here's the real evidence. Benjamin's laptop. Browser history from 4 weeks before the poisoning. Searches for cardoxin overdose symptoms and lethal sleeping pill dose. He researched exactly what happened to your wife before it happened. That's premeditation. Mr. Thornton. I made notes while she talked. Prosecutor shorthand covering the legal pad. Dates. Search terms. Prescription details. The timeline of planning. The DA is preparing arrest warrants, Jenkins continued. Attempted murder first degree for both of them, plus conspiracy and obstruction for the false statements. We're moving on this tonight. Keep me informed. Will do. The second call from Jenkins came at 8 that evening. They're in custody, both arrested at home an hour ago, being processed now. Bail hearings tomorrow morning. But given the charges and their financial situation creating flight risk, bond will be set high. Elizabeth was beside me, holding my hand. She'd heard everything through the speaker. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. Is it wrong that I feel relieved? She asked quietly. I squeezed her hand. No, it means justice is working. My phone buzzed with a text from Carter. Arrest warrants executed. Civil case now has criminal charges backing it. Asset freeze motion hearing scheduled for 4 days from now. We're winning. I read the message, then looked at Elizabeth. She was staring at a framed photo on the side table. Clara, at age 8, gap-toothed smile sitting on my shoulders at the beach. Elizabeth reached for it, hesitated with her fingers an inch from the frame, then deliberately turned it face down. I can't look at her right now, she whispered. I nodded. Neither could I. The bail hearing happened Thursday morning. Clara and Benjamin appeared via video link from the county jail, both in orange jumpsuits that looked deliberately humiliating on camera. The judge set bond at $300,000 each, high, but not insurmountable. By Friday afternoon, they'd posted bail through a bondsman, pledging their house as collateral. By Saturday, they'd retained John Peterson. Peterson's reputation preceded him. Former public defender turned high-profile criminal attorney, known for aggressive tactics and media manipulation. His strategy became clear within hours of taking the case. The Charlotte Observer ran the story on Sunday morning, front page below the fold. Father sues daughter for $2.5 million after alleged poisoning. Defense claims tragic accident. The article presented both sides with careful neutrality, but the photo told a different story. Clara looking exhausted and fragile, tears visible on her cheeks. No photo of Elizabeth in the hospital bed. Monday brought the real attack. The Observer published a follow-up interview. Clara and Benjamin sitting in their living room, speaking directly to a reporter about the tragic misunderstanding tearing their family apart. I read it at the kitchen table while Elizabeth prepared breakfast. Clara described a wonderful visit with her mother that took a terrible turn when Elizabeth became anxious about finances and took sleeping pills without telling anyone. Benjamin explained they were moments away from calling for help when the neighbor panicked unnecessarily. Both expressed shock and hurt that Samuel refused to believe them, choosing instead to destroy his own daughter's life with false accusations. The article included quotes from their attorney. Peterson positioned them as victims twice over. First of Elizabeth's accidental overdose, now of Samuel's vindictive lawsuit fueled by paranoia rather than evidence. "Listen to this," I said to Elizabeth. "Peterson claims we're weaponizing the legal system to punish grief-stricken family members who made difficult decisions in a crisis." Elizabeth sat down her coffee cup harder than necessary. Difficult decisions. They watched me beg for help and did nothing. I know. Then why does reading this make me feel like we're the ones who did something wrong? Because that was exactly what Peterson wanted. Shape the narrative before trial. Make the jury pool question whether attempted murder was really just panic and poor judgment. Classic defense strategy. My phone started ringing that afternoon. Friends, mostly former colleagues from the prosecutor's office, people who'd known me for decades, calling with carefully worded questions. Michael Anderson, retired judge, spoke with diplomatic caution. "Samuel, I saw the article. Obviously, I know there are two sides to every story. But have you considered that maybe emotions are running high? Family disputes can feel clearer than they actually are?" I explained the evidence. Browser history. Prescription bottle. Financial motive. Michael listened, made sympathetic sounds, but I heard doubt in the pauses. Jennifer Brooks, who'd worked as victim advocate during my prosecutor years, tried a different approach. "I'm not questioning your judgment. But is it possible Elizabeth's memory was affected by the trauma sometimes victims fill gaps with assumptions that feel like certainties?" More phone calls followed, each one carefully supportive on the surface, questioning underneath. The media campaign was working. Carter called Tuesday morning with news. Peterson filed a countersuit. "They're suing you and Elizabeth for defamation, claiming your false accusations have destroyed Clara's reputation and Benjamin's contracting business, asking for $600,000. That's absurd. Of course, it is. It's harassment litigation meant to create leverage, make you back down. But combined with the media coverage, he's building a narrative that might resonate with a jury. We need to be ready for this to get uglier." The asset freeze hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Carter explained the strategy. We'd present evidence of financial motive, argue that Clara and Benjamin might hide or transfer assets to avoid paying damages. The court could freeze their accounts, prevent property transfers, protect our eventual judgment. But first, we had to survive the pressure. Wednesday afternoon, I ran into Stephen Parker at the grocery store. Stephen had been in my book club for 18 years. He saw me, hesitated visibly, then approached with an expression I'd seen before on witnesses who didn't want to testify. "Samuel, how are you holding up managing? I read about everything in the paper." Must be difficult. He shifted his weight, looked at the floor. Listen, I don't want to overstep, but have you thought about mediation? Sometimes these family things, they seem clearer when you're angry. Maybe there's room for Stephen. My daughter tried to kill my wife for inheritance money. That's not a misunderstanding. His face flushed. Of course not. I'm just saying. Well, the article made it sound more complicated than the article was written by Clara's defense attorney. Right. Sure. He trailed off. Then I hope it works out. He left quickly, abandoning his half-full cart. That evening, Elizabeth found me at my desk reviewing evidence files. She sat down across from me, her expression steady despite the exhaustion visible in her eyes. People are questioning you, she said. Not a question. Some are. Do you doubt yourself? I looked at her, still fragile from the ordeal, still recovering, but clearer-eyed than I'd seen her in weeks. Sometimes, I admitted. When enough people suggest you're wrong, you start wondering. Then let me be clear, Elizabeth said. I begged our daughter for help while I was dying and she refused. That's not complicated. That's not a misunderstanding. That's attempted murder. She leaned forward. Don't let them make you forget what actually happened. The doubt didn't disappear entirely, but her certainty steadied something inside me. Thursday's hearing would tell us whether the court saw things as clearly as we did. Detective Jenkins's call came Thursday morning while I was reviewing case files at the kitchen counter. Benjamin cracked, she said without preamble. During this morning's follow-up interview, I was pushing on inconsistencies between his statement and Clara's, asking whose idea certain things were, and he just broke. I grabbed a pen, started taking notes. What did he say, quote? It was my idea to solve our financial problems. Okay, but Clara agreed. She knew what we were doing. Then his attorney jumped in, demanded we stop, but it was already on tape. I underlined the words on my notepad. My idea, Clara agreed. She knew, that's premeditation, I said. And conspiracy. Exactly. Their defense just collapsed from the inside. After hanging up, I called William Carter. He'd already heard from his sources at the DA's office, but he had additional information about what happened after Benjamin's slip. Peterson pulled them both into a conference room at the station. Carter said tried to have a private conversation about damage control, according to the officers standing outside. Clara's voice carried right through the door. She was screaming at Benjamin, calling him weak, asking how he could be so stupid to say that to police. And Benjamin yelled back that she wanted the money just as much as he did, that she helped plan everything. So why should he take the fall alone? Peterson couldn't control them. They turned on each other right there. Carter paused. Two defendants blaming each other is a prosecutor's dream. Samuel, you know that I did. I'd built cases on exactly this kind of fracture during my career. Pressure defendants until loyalty gives way to self-preservation. It always worked. Eventually, Carter called again that afternoon with a proposal. The DA's office wants to make a tactical move. They'll extend an offer to Benjamin through his attorney. Reduce charges in exchange for full testimony against Clara. Conspiracy instead of attempted murder. 9 to 11 years instead of 18 to 22. Benjamin is the weak point, I said. Thinking through the strategy, he's already cracking, already terrified. His gambling addiction, his pattern of poor decisions under pressure. He'll take the deal, but we need your authorization to coordinate with the DA. I walked to the study window, looked out at Atlanta's afternoon light. Using Benjamin to convict Clara felt calculated, manipulative. But then I remembered Elizabeth's account. Benjamin standing in front of the door while she begged for help, blocking her escape. The methodical cruelty of that moment. Make the offer, I said. The offer reached Benjamin the next morning. Carter reported that Benjamin was seriously considering it despite Peterson's advice to fight at trial. Peterson argued that turning on Clara would make Benjamin look worse to a jury. But Benjamin was caught between fear of prison and fear of being labeled a traitor. He asked for 50 hours to decide. While Benjamin deliberated, Clara made her own move. She retained a separate attorney, a woman named Michelle Grant, citing conflict of interest. Peterson couldn't represent both defendants if their interests diverged. Grant immediately filed a motion suggesting Benjamin was the primary actor and Clara had been coerced or manipulated by an abusive husband. Carter explained it to me over the phone with something approaching dark admiration. It's legally weak given the evidence, but it shows she's ruthless. She's willing to destroy Benjamin completely to save herself, fighting like someone with nothing to lose, which she doesn't. I said, exactly. That evening, I sat with Elizabeth in the living room and explained the developments. Benjamin slipped during interrogation. The plea offer. Clara's counter-strategy of blaming everything on him. Elizabeth listened without interruption, then asked a question that surprised me. If Benjamin testifies against Clara, will she definitely be convicted? I considered it honestly. Not definitely, but probably. His testimony combined with the laptop evidence, the prescriptions, your account. It builds a very strong case. She nodded slowly. Then I hope he takes the deal. Not because I want Benjamin to suffer less, but because I want to be absolutely certain Clara is held accountable. The clarity in her voice reminded me why I was doing this. Not for revenge, though that element existed. For certainty. For making sure what happened to her carried permanent consequences. My phone rang late that night, past midnight. Carter's number on the screen. Benjamin's attorney just called. He said, voice tight with controlled excitement. He's taking the deal. Full testimony. Complete cooperation. Every detail. He's giving us Clara on a silver platter. I closed my eyes, absorbed the information. Across the room. Elizabeth looked at me questioningly. I covered the phone. Benjamin is testifying against her. Elizabeth's expression didn't change, but her hand gripped the armrest of her chair, knuckles visible against the fabric. Carter continued. We're scheduling his deposition for 4 days from now. Once he's on record, Clara's defense is finished. She'll know it ought too. After hanging up, I sat in silence with Elizabeth. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she said what we were both thinking. It's really happening. Yes, I said. It is. The asset freeze motion filed Tuesday morning. I'd spent the previous day coordinating with Carter, reviewing the financial analysis Robert Ellis had prepared. Every debt, every late payment. Every desperate cash advance in the 7 months before the poisoning. The documents showed a family drowning and grasping for the inheritance that would save them. The hearing happened Thursday afternoon. Judge Martinez presided, reviewing the evidence with the methodical attention judges give to financial matters. Carter presented our case. $280,000 in combined debts. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. Clara's call to the estate attorney 5 weeks before the poisoning. The pattern was undeniable. Clara's attorney, Michelle Grant, argued that freezing assets would prevent them from paying their mortgage, essentially guaranteeing foreclosure. Carter responded that they'd already stopped making payments 4 months ago. The freeze merely formalized what was already happening. Judge Martinez granted the motion. All bank accounts frozen. No property transfers permitted. The house they'd pledged for bail was now untouchable, locked in legal limbo. They're financially paralyzed, Carter told me afterward. Can't sell, can't borrow, can't access savings. Everything they have is frozen until the civil case resolves. Benjamin's deposition was scheduled for Saturday. I didn't attend. Carter advised against it, said my presence might complicate things. Instead, I waited at home while Carter and the DA's assistant handled it. He called me Saturday evening with the summary. Benjamin gave us everything. Carter said, 52 pages of testimony. He described researching the drugs online, finding the prescription bottle from his anxiety treatment, forging a second prescription for cardoxin by using his doctor's pad during an appointment. He explained mixing both medications into Elizabeth's pasta sauce, and he detailed every conversation with Clara. How they discussed it for months, how she agreed it was the only solution to their debts, how she watched him add the drugs and said nothing. She was complicit. I said, more than complicit. She was a co-conspirator. Benjamin's testimony makes that absolutely clear. And before you ask, yes, we have corroboration. The laptop searches the prescription forgery attempt we found in medical records, Elizabeth's account of Clara refusing to call for help. Benjamin's testimony doesn't stand alone. It's supported by everything else. That evening, Detective Jenkins called with another update. Based on Benjamin's testimony, the DA filed additional charges against Clara. Not just attempted murder, but also conspiracy to commit murder and accessory after the fact. An arrest warrant was issued Saturday night. Clara was taken into custody Sunday morning. This time, bail was denied. Monday brought an unexpected development. An email from Michelle Grant arrived in my inbox. Subject line, confidential settlement discussion. I read it standing at my desk. Grant wrote on Clara's behalf, suggesting that perhaps there was room for resolution short of trial. Clara was willing to plead to lesser charges, maybe reckless endangerment instead of attempted murder. In exchange, we dropped the civil lawsuit. She emphasized that Clara was still Samuel's daughter, that families should find ways to heal rather than destroy each other. I stared at the screen for 40 seconds. Then I deleted the email. Elizabeth found me there a few minutes later. What was that about Clara's attorney suggesting we accept a plea deal and drop the lawsuit? What did you tell her? Nothing. I deleted it. Elizabeth sat down across from me. Good. Don't let her pretend this can be negotiated away. She tried to kill me for money. That's not something you compromise on. Tuesday morning, I forwarded a screenshot of the deleted email. William Carter, with a simple message, no deals, no compromise. We proceed to trial on all charges. Carter responded immediately. Understood. I'll communicate that to the DA's office. Clara's attorney will get the message. The civil lawsuit continued its parallel track with the asset freeze in place and Clara facing upgraded criminal charges. Carter filed additional motions. One sought to establish joint and several liability, meaning if we won the civil case, Benjamin would be responsible for the full $2.5 million, even though he'd taken a plea deal. The criminal reduction didn't absolve civil responsibility. That same day, the bank accelerated foreclosure proceedings on Clara and Benjamin's house. With no mortgage payments for 4 months and assets frozen, preventing any payment, the bank moved to seize the property. Notice to vacate was issued, 40 days to remove belongings. I heard about it from Robert Ellis, who was still monitoring their financial situation. They're losing everything, he said. House, savings, any equity they had. The civil judgment will attach to anything that's left, which at this point is basically nothing. They gambled everything and lost, I said. Not with satisfaction, just mechanical observation of consequences. The following week moved quickly. Benjamin's formal plea agreement was signed on July 8th. He allocuted in court, admitted under oath to conspiracy to commit attempted murder, detailed his and Clara's plan, accepted 9 years in prison. The judge accepted the plea. Clara's preliminary hearing was scheduled for July 16th, based on Benjamin's testimony, the laptop evidence, Elizabeth's account, and the prescription forgery. The judge would decide if there was sufficient cause to proceed to trial. Carter assured me it was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming, but Clara would be there in court. For the first time since her arrest, I'd have to see her face. Thursday night, July 10th. Elizabeth and I sat on our back porch. Fireworks exploded in the distance. Neighbors celebrating. We watched in silence. "Are you ready for next week?" Elizabeth asked. "For the hearing?" I thought about it, seeing Clara in the defendant's chair, hearing the charges read aloud, watching her realize how completely her plan had failed. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The story broke wide on July 12th. I was having morning coffee with Elizabeth when the local Atlanta station led with it. Daughter and son-in-law charged in poisoning plot. Inheritance motive alleged. The coverage was different this time. No careful neutrality. No both sides framing. Just evidence. Courthouse footage showed Clara and Benjamin being processed. The anchor detailed the forged prescriptions, the laptop searches, the $2 million inheritance calculation. A legal expert appeared, grave-faced, calling it one of the most cold-blooded cases in recent Georgia history. My phone started buzzing. People I hadn't heard from in weeks. The same friends who'd questioned my judgment after Peterson's media campaign. Now they were calling to apologize, to express shock, to say they had no idea the evidence was so damning. I didn't answer most of them. Robert Ellis called mid-morning with updates on Clara and Benjamin's professional situations. "The real estate agency cut ties this morning," he said. "Public statement expressing sympathy for your wife and distancing themselves completely from Clara's alleged criminal activities. Benjamin was fired yesterday by the dealership moral turpitude clause, and his parents released a statement disavowing him. I took notes while he talked, treating each detail as case information rather than victory. Employment terminated, professional reputation destroyed, family relationships severed. Consequences, not revenge. They're both completely isolated now," Robert said. "No jobs, no social circle, no family support." Over the next few days, I learned more through various sources. Former friends stopped returning their calls. Neighbors avoided them in public. The statement from Benjamin's parents was particularly cold. "We are devastated by our son's actions and choices. We support the victims in this tragedy and have no further relationship with Benjamin. Formal, absolute, final." I understood it. They were protecting themselves from association, drawing a public line between themselves and their son's crimes. It's what parents do when their child becomes a monster. I wondered if outsiders saw Elizabeth and me the same way. Parents who'd somehow produced a daughter capable of murder, 10 days after Clara's arrest. I found a letter in the mailbox, not through attorneys, directly mailed. I recognized Clara's handwriting on the envelope immediately. Elizabeth saw me holding it. From her, I nodded. We went inside. I opened it at the kitchen table while Elizabeth sat across from me. 4 pages, handwritten. Clara's voice bled through every line. "Dad, please. I know what this looks like. I know what I did was wrong. But everything spiraled out of control. The debts, the pressure, Benjamin's gambling. I wasn't thinking clearly. I never meant for Mom to actually die. I panicked. I'm so sorry. I've always loved you both. You're my parents. Please, isn't there a way to fix this? Can't we be a family again?" The letter continued in that vein. Part confession, part excuse, part desperate plea. I read it 3 times, looking for genuine remorse. I found only self-pity and manipulation. She was still framing herself as a victim of circumstances rather than the architect of attempted murder. I slid the pages across the table to Elizabeth without comment. She read in silence, then looked up. "What will you do?" I went to my desk and wrote a response by hand. 1 page, brief. "Clara, you had a choice that night. You chose to watch your mother die rather than call for help. You chose money over her life. These were your decisions made with clear intent. As the evidence shows, there is no fixing this. There is no family to return to. My attorney handles all future communication. I signed it, sealed it, and prepared it for delivery through William Carter's office. No direct contact, no opening for negotiation or emotion. Carter called that afternoon with another update. Civil trial is scheduled for July 20th, 6 days from now. With the criminal being finalized, the judge wants quick resolution. We'll get the full judgment. $2 million. They'll never pay it. Of course. They're filing bankruptcy. The point isn't the money, I said. I know. It's the public record. Official acknowledgement of what they did and what they owe follows them forever. That evening, I sat in my study reviewing the civil case file one final time. Documentation of everything. Medical bills totaling $240,000. Elizabeth suffering quantified in hospital days and therapy sessions. Lost time measured in weeks of unconsciousness and months of recovery. Behind me, the door opened quietly. Elizabeth stood there stronger now, steady on her feet without the hesitation I'd seen weeks ago. "The trial is in 6 days," she said. I nodded. She crossed the room, sat in the chair beside my desk, the same position we'd held through this entire ordeal. "Partners in prosecution. Will you need to testify?" I asked. She considered it. "If it helps make sure they're held accountable, yes, I'll do whatever is necessary." Her voice carried no fear now, only resolve. I reached for her hand. She took it. The courtroom on July 16th was smaller than I'd expected for what the media had called one of North Carolina's most shocking cases. Judge Harrison presided, her expression neutral as the clerk called the matter State of North Carolina versus Clara Harris and Benjamin Harris. Clara entered first, wearing a gray suit that looked borrowed, probably from her new attorney. Her face was drawn, eyes red from what I assumed were sleepless nights, or tears, or both. Benjamin followed, separate from her physically and legally now. His plea agreement had already been signed, but he was present for Clara's arraignment. The charges were read aloud. Conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, attempted murder in the first degree, obstruction of justice. Each charge carried its own weight, its own maximum sentence, added together. They meant Clara faced 28 years to life. Her attorney, Michelle Grant, entered a plea of not guilty, standard procedure, even when the evidence was overwhelming. The trial date was set for September 18th, 2 months away. But as we left the courthouse, Carter pulled me aside. "The DA thinks Clara will change her plea before trial, once she sees Benjamin's full testimony and discovery. Once she understands how completely the evidence destroys her defense, she'll take whatever deal they offer. Nobody wants to face a jury with this case." He was right. 4 weeks later, on August 6th, Clara accepted a plea agreement. Guilty to attempted murder in the second degree, 18 years minimum, possibility of parole after 14. The judge accepted the plea on August 10th. I was in the courtroom for the sentencing. Elizabeth was beside me. We sat in the second row, close enough to see Clara's face when the judge spoke. "Miss Harris, you planned and executed an attempt to murder your own mother for financial gain," Judge Harrison said. "You researched the methods. You obtained the means. And when your victim was dying, begging for help, you refused to act. The only reason your mother is alive today is because a neighbor had the decency and courage you lacked." Clara's shoulders shook. Tears fell. But whether from remorse or self-pity, I couldn't tell. 18 years in state prison. The judge continued. "You'll be eligible for parole after 14, but that's not guaranteed. It depends entirely on whether you demonstrate genuine rehabilitation and remorse, qualities I saw no evidence of today." The gavel fell. Clara was remanded immediately. I watched officers escort her out through the side door. She didn't look back at us. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to see. Benjamin's sentencing happened the same day. Despite his cooperation, the judge gave him 9 years, acknowledging his testimony, but noting that he was the primary actor, the one who actually administered the poison. He'd be released in 2034 if he served his full term without parole. The civil trial was almost anticlimactic after the criminal convictions. With guilty pleas, the civil judgment was a formality. Carter presented our case on August 20th. Medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, the permanent impact on Elizabeth's health. The defense offered no real contest. What could they say? Judge Martinez awarded us $2 million, the full amount we'd requested. Collecting it was impossible. Clara and Benjamin had both filed bankruptcy. Their house had been foreclosed and sold at auction. Bank accounts were empty. Future earnings would be garnished. But prison wages barely covered commissary. "We'll never see a dollar of it," Carter admitted afterward. "But it's on record. Public acknowledgement of harm done and debt owed. If either of them ever earns money, inheritance, lottery, book deal, whatever, we can pursue it. The judgment doesn't expire." That night, Elizabeth made dinner. Simple pasta. Not the dish Clara had poisoned, but close enough that the parallel wasn't lost on either of us. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from shared understanding rather than empty conversation. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked after we'd cleaned up. "The lawsuits, the prosecution cutting her off completely." I thought about it honestly. No. I protected you. I made sure they faced consequences. I'd make every choice again. Even knowing she's your daughter, especially knowing that she used family as cover for attempted murder. That makes it worse, not better. Elizabeth nodded slowly. I feel the same way. I thought I might feel guilt or doubt by now, but I don't. Just relief that it's finished. We stood at the window in our living room, looking out at Atlanta's evening lights. The city continued its normal rhythm. People heading home from work, cars streaming along the highway, life proceeding as it always had. But for us, everything had changed. Not in obvious ways. We still lived in the same house, still had the same daily routines, but the foundation underneath had shifted. We'd faced something most people never encounter: betrayal from within the family, an attempt on life from someone who should have protected it. And we'd survived. More than survived. We'd ensured accountability, built protections, created consequences. The inheritance Clara had tried to murder for would never touch her hands. Our wills now directed everything to charity. The house she'd counted on inheriting would benefit strangers instead. Was it worth it? Elizabeth asked quietly. Everything we lost. We didn't lose everything, I said. We lost a daughter who was willing to kill you. That's not a loss. That's removal of a threat. She leaned against me. I suppose you're right. September turned to October. Life resumed its patterns. Elizabeth continued physical therapy, regaining strength she'd lost during the hospitalization. I returned to occasional consulting work, helping young prosecutors with complex cases. We had dinner with friends who'd stood by us through everything. The media moved on to other stories. Clara and Benjamin became footnotes, cautionary tales about greed and family betrayal, but no longer headlines. Sometimes I thought about the daughter I'd raised, the child who'd sat on my shoulders at the beach, who'd called me for advice, who'd once been someone I trusted completely. That person was gone, had been gone for a long time. Probably. I'd just been too close to see it. What remained was a woman in prison serving 18 years for attempting to murder her mother. That was the truth of what she'd become. Accepting it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. One evening in mid-October, Elizabeth and I stood at the same window where we'd stood after the civil trial. The view hadn't changed. The city lights still spread below us, indifferent to our story. Do you think about her? Elizabeth asked. Sometimes, I admitted. Mostly I think about what might have happened if David hadn't called for help. If you died that night and they'd gotten away with it, but that didn't happen. No, Because we fought back. Because we refused to let them rewrite the story. Elizabeth turned to face me. Thank you for believing me. For fighting for me. For not letting family loyalty override the truth. I took her hand. You're my family. You're who I protect. We stood together in the gathering darkness, survivors of something that should have destroyed us, but didn't. The wound would never fully heal. Scars like this don't fade. But we'd ensured that the people who caused it paid the appropriate price. That was enough.